He knelt with a diamond ring and said, "I don't care about your money. I love you." But love doesn't hide lies. So I tested him. I became a nobody, a poor waitress in my own cafe. The day he spat at me, my mother-in-law-to-be laughed. Unaware the waitress, she mocked, owned everything around her. This is the story of how I lost the man I loved and found the truth that set me free. Watch till the end, because what happened next turned humiliation into power and betrayal into justice. If you believe karma never misses its mark, hit like, subscribe, and share this story. I used to think love would feel like safety, like finally exhaling after holding your breath for years. When I met him, that's exactly how it felt. He wasn't like the men who chased my name, my reputation, or my wealth. He looked at me as if he saw the woman, not the billionaire. And for the first time in a long while, I let someone in. His words were soft, his laughter effortless, and the way he said my name made even the busiest day feel quiet. I had built an empire, but this was what I thought happiness was supposed to look like. The night he proposed still replays in my mind. It wasn't extravagant, not like the grand gestures I was used to. We were standing by the lake near my estate, the city lights shimmering in the water. He knelt, held out a ring, and said, "I don't care about what you own or how many people know your name. I love you." The woman, not the world she built. My throat tightened, not because of the proposal, but because I wanted so badly to believe those words. I said yes, of course. The media called it the engagement of the year, the perfect union between success and sincerity. But even perfection can have cracks, invisible to the eye. His family welcomed me politely, but there was something cold in their smiles. His mother, a woman of old wealth and quiet cruelty, often reminded me in subtle ways that I'd never truly belong. Once, she said, "Money can't buy pedigree, dear, but I suppose it can rent the illusion for a while." I laughed it off at the time, pretending her words didn't sting. But deep down, I felt a shift. Maybe I wanted her approval too much, or maybe I just wanted to prove I could be loved without needing to prove myself. Either way, I ignored the warning signs. The weeks after our engagement were a blur of charity events, interviews, and photo shoots. Everywhere we went, people called us a power couple. But behind closed doors, I started noticing small things. The way his tone changed when I disagreed with him, how he hesitated to introduce me to certain friends, how his mother's calls always seemed to end with him in a foul mood. I tried to convince myself that every couple had friction, that love was about patience. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. One night, as we were leaving a gala, I overheard him talking to someone on the phone. He didn't see me standing behind the column when he said, "She's everything I need right now. Just trust me. Once the deal's sealed, we'll both have what we want." My chest went cold. Was he talking about me or using me? I never confronted him that night. Instead, I smiled through the cameras, through the champagne toasts, through every staged moment of perfection. But in my heart, I made a quiet promise. If he truly loved me for who I was, not for the life I built, then one day I would find out. And when that day came, there would be no press, no diamonds, and no mercy for deceit dressed as devotion. The doubts started quietly, like whispers in a crowded room. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that every relationship had its uneasy moments. But something about the way he began to move through my world didn't sit right with me. He started showing up less, missing dinners, skipping meetings we'd planned with my team. When he did come around, he was full of excuses, too much work, family emergencies. You wouldn't understand. And maybe I wouldn't have if I hadn't spent years building an empire on instincts sharper than any lie. The final straw came one evening when I arrived at his mother's estate for dinner. She greeted me with that familiar cold smile and said he'd be a little late. I tried to make conversation, but she kept circling back to my money. "You're a clever woman," she said, swirling her wine. "But love is a different kind of investment. Not every man can handle a woman richer than he is." I smiled politely, but my heart was pounding. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. She knew something. And suddenly, I needed to know too. That night, I asked my assistant, Jordan, to look into a few things, nothing invasive, just patterns. Where he'd been, who he'd met. Within days, Jordan came back with the truth I'd been afraid to face. My fiancé had been attending business dinners with women from elite circles, and worse, his mother had been arranging most of them. I stared at the photos, my hand trembling. There he was, laughing, leaning in close, his body language intimate, familiar. To the world, he was my loyal partner. But behind my back, he was auditioning replacements, ones who could match his mother's idea of social class. Still, I didn't want to accuse him blindly. Maybe there was another explanation. Maybe I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew. Love doesn't need to pass a background check. Only lies do. And that's when the idea hit me. If he claimed to love me for who I was, I would give him the perfect chance to prove it. I decided to disappear. Not from his life, but from the version of me he recognized. I called in a favor from a trusted friend at one of my hotel cafes and asked for something no one expected. A job as a waitress. No one would suspect the owner was behind the counter. I swapped my diamond earrings for cheap studs, tied my hair under a dull brown wig, and traded designer heels for worn-out flats. Looking in the mirror that morning, I hardly recognized myself. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange kind of calm. I wanted to see how he treated people when he didn't need to impress them. Would he still be kind? Would he still see the heart behind the uniform? I told myself it wasn't revenge, just truth. I needed to know if the man who held my hand under the stars would still reach for it when there were no cameras, no titles, and no spotlight. As I wiped down tables and took orders in my own cafe, I felt invisible and oddly free. Every laugh, every comment, every glance became a test. I was no longer the billionaire fiancé. I was just another face in the crowd, and soon I would find out exactly who he was when no one was watching. The morning he walked into the cafe, the air shifted. I was wiping a counter when I caught the reflection of his suit in the glass. Sharp, tailored, expensive. For a moment, my breath caught. It was strange seeing him there, in my world, but not recognizing me in it. He moved with that same confidence, that same easy charm that had once disarmed me completely. But this time, I wasn't the woman at his side. I was the waitress he didn't see. He wasn't alone. His mother walked in behind him, her pearls gleaming like a crown she thought she was born wearing. Two of his wealthy friends followed, loud and arrogant, the kind of men who believed money excused cruelty. They chose a table near the center, where everyone could see them. I picked up my notepad and walked over, forcing a smile that hid the storm brewing in my chest. "Good afternoon," I said softly. "Can I take your order?" He didn't even look up. "Give us a minute," he said, waving me off like I was an inconvenience. His mother glanced at me, and recognition flickered for half a second. Then came that cruel, deliberate smile. "I swear these places hire anyone these days," she murmured to her friends. "No poise, no grace. Look at her uniform, wrinkled." The table laughed. My fiancé chuckled too, and I felt my heart twist. Every word landed like glass, shattering against marble. The man who once said he loved me for my heart was now mocking my existence. I wanted to scream, to tear off the disguise, and ask him who he thought he was. But I stayed still, steady, composed. Let him dig his own grave. When I returned with their drinks, one of his friends, accidentally, knocked his cup over, splashing coffee across the table and my apron. "Watch it," he barked. "You people can't even serve right. You people." The words rang louder than the laughter that followed. My fiancé leaned back, smirking. "Relax, it's not like she can afford dry cleaning," he said. His mother laughed so hard, she had to dab her eyes. My hands trembled, but not from shame. From fury. I realized then that I hadn't lost a man. I had escaped a fraud. As I walked away to compose myself, I noticed a few customers watching quietly, uncomfortable with what they'd seen. One young woman near the counter looked at me with tears in her eyes, whispering, "You didn't deserve that." That was the moment I knew I had all the proof I needed. When they finished, he left a small tip, coins, not bills, and strutted out as if he'd just conquered the world. I stood there, staring at the table, at the mess they'd left behind, at the fragments of a love I'd once thought was real. That night, I went home, removed the wig, wiped the makeup from my tired face, and stared into the mirror. The reflection that looked back wasn't broken. It was awake. The test was over, and now the reckoning would begin. The night of the gala felt colder than usual, though the ballroom shimmered with gold light and music. It was the kind of event that defined reputations and destroyed them. I arrived early, my team buzzing around me, reporters waiting outside, cameras flashing. The air was thick with anticipation. My fiancé believed tonight was his victory lap, that he'd be publicly announced as co-chair of my foundation and step closer to inheriting my empire through marriage. Little did he know, tonight was the night masks would fall. I remember seeing him walk in, polished, confident, arm-hooked with his mother's. They looked like royalty stepping into a kingdom they didn't deserve. He kissed my cheek in front of everyone, whispered, "You look stunning," and smiled that same smile that had once made me believe in forever. For a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered the laughter, the mockery, the way he had looked at me when I was just a waitress. Pity died, and purpose took its place. As the music faded and the speeches began, I stood on the stage with a calm that could have been mistaken for grace. But inside, my heart was fire. I began by thanking the guests, the sponsors, and my fiancé, who stood proudly beside his mother, basking in the spotlight. "There's someone special I want to acknowledge tonight," I said. "A woman who reminded me that respect is priceless, and no amount of money or charm can disguise the lack of it." The lights dimmed slightly as the projector flickered on. And then, there it was, the cafe footage, the moment he sneered, "She's worthless." The laughter that followed, his mother's cold voice dripping with arrogance. Every cruel word echoed across the silent hall. You could have heard a pin drop. Faces turned. Gasps filled the room. His complexion turned ghostly pale. His mother's hand froze midair, the pearl bracelet on her wrist trembling. He took a step forward, whispering, "Turn it off." His voice cracked under the weight of his own exposure. But I didn't stop. I looked at the crowd and said clearly, "That waitress you saw humiliated was me." A wave of shock rippled through the audience. Reporters stood from their seats. His mother covered her mouth. He tried to reach me, but I stepped back. "You said you loved me for who I was," I said, my voice steady. "But when you thought I was no one, you showed me exactly who you are." The applause started slowly, then grew louder, echoing through the ballroom like thunder. People stood, clapping not for vengeance, but for truth. He stood frozen, exposed, speechless, drowning in the silence of his own disgrace. Security approached quietly, escorting him and his mother out as cameras followed. When I stepped off that stage, my assistant handed me a glass of water and whispered, "You did it." I didn't feel triumphant, just free. Because betrayal doesn't always need revenge. Sometimes it just needs light. And that night, every lie he ever told burned under it. The fallout was faster than I expected. Ruthless, poetic, and eerily quiet. By sunrise, the video had gone viral. Every major news outlet picked it up. Billionaire exposes fiancé's public humiliation in gala scandal. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. My inbox flooded with messages, some from strangers calling me brave, others from women saying, "Thank you for doing what we never could." But in the midst of all that noise, I felt strangely calm. The truth had finally spoken for itself. His downfall, though, was brutal. Overnight, his reputation shattered. The partnerships he'd bragged about, gone. The investors who once praised his business acumen withdrew their support. His name became synonymous with arrogance and deceit. Even his closest friends stopped taking his calls. One of my legal teams informed me that his mother's company, the one she'd built her life's pride on, was under financial review. Turns out, some of their charity funds had mysteriously disappeared. The same night I exposed their cruelty, karma had decided to balance its books. Still, I didn't gloat. That wasn't why I did any of it. I wasn't after revenge. I was after clarity. I needed to see people for who they truly were, and the truth didn't disappoint. But karma has a way of finishing the stories we don't have the heart to end. Within weeks, I quietly acquired controlling shares of his mother's company through a charity merger. She never saw it coming. The woman who once said I could rent the illusion of class now answered to my board. I'll never forget the day we crossed paths again. She came to my office, clutching her pearls like armor, her eyes full of shame and fury. "You destroyed us," she hissed. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "No, Margaret. You destroyed yourself. I just turned on the lights." She left without another word. That was the last time I ever saw her. As for him, a month later, he sent a letter. No apology, no ownership, just self-pity. He wrote that he'd lost everything, that he wished we could go back to simpler days. I didn't respond. Because the truth is, love built on lies can never go back. It only rots forward. The man who once said he didn't care about my money had only ever cared about what my name could buy him. And when the world saw the real him, his charm lost its value. I poured my energy into rebuilding something better, not revenge, but renewal. My foundation, the Second Sight Project, was born from that pain. It provided education and legal aid to women who'd been deceived, manipulated, or silenced. I wanted to prove that even betrayal could bloom into something beautiful when watered with purpose. Sometimes I think about that day in the cafe, the spilled coffee, the laughter, the humiliation. If I could go back, I wouldn't change a thing, because that day didn't break me. It revealed me. And it showed the world that karma doesn't shout, it whispers. I saw everything. Months passed, and life slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. The media storm faded, the headlines moved on, and the world found a new scandal to devour. But in that calm, I found something priceless: peace. My mornings no longer began with business calls or board meetings, but with silence, coffee, and gratitude. I'd built my empire again, but this time on honesty and inner strength rather than love built on illusions. Yet life has a strange way of circling back, offering closure when you least expect it. One afternoon, while reviewing plans for a women's shelter under my foundation, my assistant walked in with an envelope. "It's from him," she said quietly. I hesitated for a moment before opening it. Inside was a letter, his handwriting, uneven and tired. The words were nothing like the ones he used to charm me with. He admitted that after the gala, everything had fallen apart. His mother had turned against him, his friends had vanished, and he'd been forced to sell his properties to cover debts. He wrote that he finally understood what I meant that night, that respect, not riches, is the truest form of love. At the end of the letter, he said something that froze me for a second. "You were my test, and I failed. But I hope one day you'll remember the man I tried to be, not the one I became." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. I didn't feel anger anymore, only a soft ache for what could have been, and quiet gratitude for what was, because sometimes losing someone you loved isn't tragedy, it's divine protection. A few weeks later, I attended a local cafe opening, not one of mine, just a small neighborhood spot run by a young woman who'd once been at that gala, the one who had whispered, "You didn't deserve that." She hugged me when she saw me. "You inspired me," she said. "I used to think power came from money. Now I know it comes from dignity." Her words melted something inside me. I smiled and told her, then that night wasn't wasted. As I sat in that cafe, watching people laugh and talk, I realized how far I'd come. I wasn't that heartbroken woman anymore, desperate to be seen for her worth. I had become the kind of woman who didn't need validation to feel whole. The kind who could walk through fire and come out unburned, glowing with purpose. They say karma never forgets. But what they don't tell you is that peace doesn't either. The people who tried to break you will one day see you shining from the ruins they built. And in that moment, they'll understand. They never destroyed you. They prepared you. I walked out of that cafe, the evening sun warm on my face, my heart light. Love had betrayed me once, but life had redeemed me, and that, I realized, was the sweetest ending I could have asked for. So if someone claims to love you for who you are, test their respect, not their words. Because the moment they fail to treat you right in your worst disguise, they never deserved you at your best. If this story moved you, drop a heart in the comments, share it with someone who needs strength, and subscribe for more stories where karma speaks louder than revenge.